Okie dokie, we are back, and this time we are finally talking about none other than Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 2, which I recently watched in theaters. Now, I know that last week we got into the whole Indiana Jones movie, and we got to talk about what I thought of the movie, how fun it was, how it all pieces things together, and that movie was great. And now I wanted to get into the second movie that I saw on the same day as I did, and that is Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which I have to say surprised me in some ways that I wasn't expecting. Now, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which is a very long name for a movie, but for this one it actually works, is the first part of two parts, and based on my understanding, the second part is coming out next year. And after seeing part 1, I am genuinely interested in what part 2 is gonna bring. Now, for this story, I think that it is probably the first time, I think in the more recent Mission Impossible movies, that a mission has been clearly stated in a way that every person will understand not only what the threat is, but also how dangerous and how volatile it can be, and how certain players are going to be after this one piece of, technology. Now, before I go any further and kind of spoil the whole movie for you, I'm going to put up a spoiler warning right now because I want to make sure that you watch this movie before going any further in this video, because it's going to make no sense at all for you to continue when you're going to get a whole lot of spoilers in this video. So what I'm going to do is just let you know I'm going to be spoiling a lot of stuff of the movie, and I don't want to ruin it for you. So having said that, let's continue. So the threat in this movie is none other than an AI. This AI, they are kind of going after it because what happened was they are trying to use this AI as a stealth machine. The idea behind this whole stealth machine is that it's supposed to hide submarines from, enemy radar. And what happened was this AI worked. It, made the enemy submarine, or the hero submarine, disappear, but it backfired. This entire thing backfires on them, and they ended up shooting toward an enemy vessel that wasn't there, because the AI created a fake enemy vessel that was supposed to be there, but it wasn't, and ultimately it backfires on them, and it sinks itself and kills everybody on the submarine. And this AI continues to work from where it's at underwater inside the submarine, which has no survivors whatsoever, but it continues to work because it's all inside a capsule, like a nice closed capsule, and it's in the middle of the Arctic Ocean, and it's a situation where you're like, okay, so this AI did all of this. How is this thing connected to, MI6 and Tom Cruise and the whole, Impossible Mission Force? It turns out that this AI goes rogue and essentially starts to piece itself into things and invades specific pieces of technology. And there's actually a whole explanation as to the whole process of how this AI got out, and how dangerous this whole AI can be. And now specific people are trying to take control over this AI, because whoever controls this AI controls the world, and that includes media. You can control, people's, perceptions. You could technically control politics with this entire AI. So it is a very, hefty idea that they are playing on. And, it surprised me when I was actually watching this movie, is that, this movie isn't as action heavy as the other Mission Impossible movies. But at the same time, the threat in this movie doesn't require it to have as much crazy action. So I mean, sure, you have, the chase in Rome, the car chase in Rome with, Haley Atwell and Tom Cruise. Those scenes are amazing. You have the, action scene of him jumping off the cliff. You have little, fights here and there. But ultimately, this movie's weight is put on the threat of this AI. And it's a much more cerebral film, I was expecting going into this movie that I was going to get, an action-heavy movie, and there's going to be action non-stop, and it wouldn't, stop, and it would be continue. Actually, it's not that. It's a movie that is very much focused on explaining to you that this threat is real and could be something that, the situation in this movie isn't very far from reality. A lot of the issues that we see are technically supposed to be far from reality. This is not one of those cases. And it's very interesting that it's more of a suspense film than it is an action film. And I was surprised by that because I wasn't expecting that. But like always, Tom Cruise in this movie really hits it out of the ballpark. He's fantastic in this movie. His entire, crew, it's Simon Pegg, you have, the characters we love, like Luther, come back. And, and then we have Haley Atwell now in this whole mix, which I think she is a great new addition to Mission Impossible. She carries her character really well. We see that she's multifaceted. She is not a damsel in distress whatsoever. And at the same time, she is someone who can hold her own. She's very vulnerable, and she can also, kick some serious ass in this movie. So we get to see this multifaceted woman join this team, and they give her the choice. Tom Cruise, sits down with her and says, "Listen, we have, there's three choices. You could go to jail, you could end up getting yourself killed, or you can join us, and fight crime across, the world." And this is a fantastic kind of introduction to the recruitment process that they go through, and having that whole spiel with Tom and Luther, having Ethan and Luther have that sort of conversation, which is something that we never get. That is something that I wanted to get into of this movie. We get a lot of conversations in this movie, which is something that we never get in a Mission Impossible movie. We get a lot of action, but we don't get the core of the story. And this movie actually presents us a core story that is very well leading us into the next movie. If you watch this movie, you know that there's going to be a second one, not only based on the title, but how it ends. It ends in a way that's okay, we've concluded this piece of the story. Now we're going to get into the next piece of the story. And they do that really well. And I'm very interested in seeing where they're going to take this movie, because it is going to be a very interesting kind of take. And based on the crazy marketing that we've seen Tom Cruise do, and talking to people at CinemaCon, or sitting on the wing of an airplane like a freaking maniac, That alone gets me excited for part 2, knowing that, you know, we're gonna get some really crazy stuff in part 2, considering that part 1 was kind of low-key in my opinion. But nonetheless, it is a great film and deserves to be seen in a movie theater. So much so that before the movie even begins, you have Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise saying, hey, we built this experience for you guys to come see in theaters. So thank you so much for coming out to see this movie, and please enjoy the show. Like, dude, what actor in history does that? Like, Tom Cruise literally sits in front of you and tells you thank you for coming to the movie theaters. Like, nobody does that. Like, that's kind of genius in my mind. Like, dude, that's awesome. And he did the same thing with Top Gun Maverick, which we also saw in theaters. Fantastic movie to see in theaters. But still, like, come on, no one does that. That's freaking awesome. And I appreciate that, you know? I really do appreciate someone who takes the time to thank the audience for being where they are. So yes, I do highly, highly recommend you go out and watch this movie in theaters. I think that it's a perfect part 1 to this whole thing, you know. It does have an Uncharted-like sequence, like, no joke whatsoever. I was sitting in the movie theater, everybody was saying, hey, listen, there's a part in this movie that is just like Uncharted. And as I was watching it, I was like, okay, yes, it's just like Uncharted. I was watching it and I was like, okay, this is clearly taken out from the book of Uncharted in a good way, because it's used in a very smart and calculated way, and they did it beautifully, and I loved it. Yeah, and this movie also really likes to highlight their characters. You know, I really think that they're highlighting individual characters in this movie in a big way, and they did that really well. I mean, even, you know, people who would do something bad with this AI technology, they are, you know, presenting them as not just sinister, you know, mustache twirling villains. These are people who could use this stuff for really bad practices. And, you know, having all these things work together is really interesting and really gets me excited for part 2. So overall, I think this movie was fantastic. I think it really is a cerebral movie that anybody can actually sit back and enjoy and, you know, really start a discussion. And speaking of discussions, I want to hear from you. What do you guys think of this movie? If you've seen this entire movie, what do you think about it? Do you think it is a really enjoyable movie? Does it garner the necessary attention to go see in theaters? And is AI really going to reach a level of craziness as it does in this movie? Let's hope not. Fingers crossed, let's hope it doesn't get that crazy. But let's start the discussion down below. I want to hear from you guys. And while you're down there, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified when videos go live on my channel. And having said that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.